Hey, let's talk about abortion for a second. Why is it that Christians are so opposed to abortion? Well, it's rooted in our values. For starters, Christians value life, every life. We value life because we believe that every person is created in the image of God. And because God loves everyone, we love everyone. And that extends all the way to the unborn. Just because they've not emerged into the world yet doesn't mean that they're not alive. And because we know that they're alive, they have a heartbeat, they have brain activity, they can feel pain, they're self-aware. Because we know that they're alive, we value them and we want to protect them. Our opposition to abortion is also rooted in our value that we hold for women. We know that God loves every woman, and we value women and we value mothers, and we know that abortion is not good for women. Abortion is likely to increase the possibilities of mental health for women who undergo abortions. That includes depression, that includes anxiety, that includes regret. We don't want any woman to have to experience that. And so we think it's important to have laws that protect women from that. Now, we also believe that for those who have experienced abortion, who have had to make that difficult and painful choice, there is hope. There is peace. There is forgiveness. There is restoration on the other side because God loves you and He forgives you and He wants to give you a brand new life free of that despair, free of that guilt, free of that shame, free of that depression, free of that anxiety. We believe that God loves you and forgives you and wants to give you something brand new. And finally, our third value is that we value the oppressed. The God of the Bible teaches us that we ought to stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. We ought to speak out for those who are on the margins of society. We ought to argue in favor of those who are being persecuted and who are being mistreated. And there is no one who is more oppressed than a child who can't speak for themselves, who's being killed, not for anything that they've done, other than just simply the fact that they're alive. And because we value the oppressed and we want to speak for those who can't speak for themselves, that's why we oppose abortion. We value life, we value women, and we value the oppressed. And because of that, we oppose abortion. Now let's talk about issue one. Because very shortly, we here in Ohio are voting on this really important issue. And what I want you to understand is, while this is about abortion, it's about a whole lot more than that. And this issue is written so deceptively that there are many people who are voting yes who don't really know what they're voting for. So let's walk through the issue real quickly. First of all, this issue begins by saying every individual has a right. That gives no age limit. It gives no parental involvement. What it means is that children can make decisions that they're not ready to make, that they're not capable of making, that they can be guided by someone who doesn't care for them, who doesn't have their best interests at heart, into doing things that could have lifelong ramifications. And we need to protect children from themselves sometimes. And so this constitutional amendment doesn't do that. It says every individual has a right to make and carry out one's own reproductive decisions. That's pretty vague, isn't it? Including but not limited to. That's a really important phrase because that including but not limited to means that anytime, anywhere, any lawyer can make any argument to say, hey, this is a reproductive decision and so this child should be allowed to make it. Let me run a scenario by you that's not far-fetched. You could have a child who's struggling with identity issues that doesn't want to talk to their parents about it, that goes to a school guidance counselor or goes to a teacher, and they could essentially go and begin to have gender-affirming care right up to and including surgery without their parents ever knowing. This constitutional amendment will allow for children to be permanently sterilized without their parents ever knowing. It's dangerous. It's deceptive. Now, this constitutional amendment does allow for legislation to be written that prohibits abortion in the case of fetal viability. But then it defines fetal viability in a completely non-scientific way. It leaves it up to the opinion of any doctor anywhere. It doesn't give scientific facts or scientific reasons why a fetus might be viable. Things like if it has a heartbeat, if its lungs are developed, if it has brain activity, if it can feel pain, if it is aware of itself. These are all scientific reasons that can be quantified to show that a fetus is viable. No, instead it says a fetus is viable if the doctor decides it is or the doctor decides it isn't. So any doctor anywhere who's treating a patient, so this could be a psychiatrist, it could be a psychologist, can simply say, in my professional opinion, this fetus wasn't viable, therefore we can go ahead and abort it. And they will be protected by law if that's their professional opinion. Now, additionally, it says that if it's necessary to protect the patient's life or health. But health is a really vague word, isn't it? And it includes not just physical health or biological health, but emotional health and mental health. So you could have a doctor the day before a woman delivers who simply says, I think that having a child will be detrimental to my patient's mental health, and so we should abort this child the day before it's born, or even the day it's supposed to be born. That's what this constitutional amendment opens the door to. One other thing I want you to notice is who this constitutional amendment protects. Because what it says is that the state, and we'll look at the definition of state in a second, the state shall not directly or indirectly burden, penalize, prohibit, interfere with, or discriminate against an individual's right to exercise this right, or a person or entity that assists an individual exercising this right. Here's what that means. This law, this constitutional amendment, protects organizations like Planned Parenthood from any kind of government oversight. It protects teachers and school counselors who act against the wishes of parents. All they have to do is cite this constitutional amendment and say, I am assisting this child in exercising their right. And they are now protected by law from the parents stepping in and saying, I want something different for my child. Additionally, state here is defined as any government entity and any political subdivision, which means it can be applied to school boards, to city councils, to townships. And so even at the very lowest levels of government now, governments in the state of Ohio would not be able to make any laws, any regulations to say, hey, we want our guidance counselors in our schools to do this. We want our teachers to work alongside parents. We don't necessarily want abortion clinics in our city. They won't be able to do that anymore. All of that will be gone because of this amendment. And finally, let's just point out that a constitutional amendment is not the way to fix this problem. I know that there's a lot of people who have issues with the laws that are on the books or the laws that are potentially going to be on the books in Ohio. There are some who argue there need to be exceptions in some cases for the life and health of the mother or in cases of rape and incest. And sure, we have a legislative process that allows us to work towards that. Anytime there's a law on the books, we can go back to it, and through the legislative process, that law can be changed, that law can be repealed, that law can be fixed. But the constitutional amendment means this is on the books forever and ever. And we can't fix it, we can't change it, we can't go back and undo it because it's now a constitutional amendment. This would add this constitutional amendment to the Ohio Bill of Rights. The place where we have the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion, freedom from unlawful searches and seizures, the freedom of victims to pursue their perpetrators in court. Those really important freedoms. This is now going to be right alongside of those as something that we can't go back and fix. This is an incredibly extreme constitutional amendment. It's written in deceptive language. It's not the right fix to Ohio's problem. So if you want to work on the abortion issue, I don't care if you're pro-life or pro-choice, there's a way to do that. It's through our legislative process, not through an unfair, unjust, very deceptive constitutional amendment. Vote no on issue 1.